Cindy, as advisors, we work with our clients to help them stress test their financial plans. We work through what-if scenarios and help them crunch the numbers. But I don't think I'm alone in never having included a scenario on a what if there was a global pandemic that brought the world economy to its knees. So this was just as much a surprise for me as an advisor as it was for our clients. Not surprisingly, many Canadians were not financially prepared for the financial consequences of a global health crisis. 2020 hit us all by surprise and forced many businesses to adapt or otherwise struggle. Considering this, has your approach to business changed? And if so, how?
It's a very good question, Chris. It certainly did need to adapt on my end. And initially, it starts off with, well, how do I get in front of people? How do I now prospect remotely? When in the past, it was heavily dependent on in-person networking events, for example. And so for me, social media was a platform I used to market myself, something I used in the past, but now is heavily relied on to do most of my marketing. And to do it successfully, you need to cater to what your audience wants to hear. And so it just so happens that the demographic I work with was starting to shift away from products such as investments and insurance, because suddenly there was now a very intense cash flow strain. Individuals did not have excess cash to invest or to buy insurance policies. And so in order to cater to that need, I need to switch my focus. And so my focus had switched from a sales-based approach to primarily a service and support-based approach, where I'm now charging clients to spend time working on those fundamentals where previously they were just a free value add, ultimately leading to the sale of insurance and investments. But now they became a focus for me. And so my time was spent on the fundamentals such as cash flow planning and debt management with my clients. And so too did my approach need to change in terms of how I communicate with my clients. Switching to this support model meant keeping in touch with them more frequently and in a means that doesn't feel too stiff or limited, such as email. And so now I found myself using applications such as WhatsApp or text messages to communicate more frequently, more casually, and keep that ongoing conversation happening with the clients.
Please elaborate. What are some of the points to focus on for individuals with cash flow issues?
A lot of individuals were faced with the elimination of their income entirely. And so now it became very important to address the need to fund for emergencies. And this became a practice in, again, returning to the fundamentals, distilling expenses down to the bare necessities, to establish minimum income targets. I believe that many individuals are not quite aware of what those numbers are for the household. And so they are immediately struck with panic in the fact that they do not have income, but they're not even quite sure how much income is needed to support the household. So this became a conversation and activity that is very important to return to with the clients. And so now a lot of my time was spent focusing on fundamental practices such as creating budgets and spending projections when tapping into emergency savings that may already exist, or spending projections on how to fund that emergency savings, assuming that they have a consistent and ongoing income to do so. Additionally, for those who lost their income and had no prospects of obtaining their job again in the near future, we now had to turn our eyes towards the emergency government benefits that were provided and rolled out by the federal government. Hand in hand with cash flow planning came the need to now address debt planning. The debts that exist and became a burden to those who were just trying to make ends meet and pay for their mortgage, pay for rent and groceries. Now debt became this additional burden weighing them down, but also with consequences if it doesn't get paid. And so this became a planning opportunity with clients. How can we consolidate debts, turn this into a more manageable payment? How can we reduce interest rates? And so personally, I took it upon myself to provide value to clients by assisting them on the phone with their financial institutions, helping them negotiate better interest rates or consolidation loans. Additionally, it's very important to bring up and help the client understand the consequences of payment deferrals on these debts if they absolutely cannot meet the minimum debt servicing required. And so there is, of course, a big difference between deferrals on credit card payments and deferrals on a mortgage payment, for example. And many consumers are not quite aware what is implied when you defer these payments. But in many instances, it was necessary because they certainly could not make ends meet. And so this became very important to address with clients and help them understand.
Many advisors run their business solely on insurance sales. Have you incorporated risk management with your clients during this time? Maybe we could start with a client who currently has insurance.
Yes, absolutely. Insurance continues to remain a very important part of my practice. And I can appreciate the fact that although it made sense for me to primarily switch to a fee-for-service model, many advisors still rely on insurance as the very core and basis of their business. And so how do we speak to individuals with this cash flow strain who already have insurance? It became especially important to now sit with your clients and re-examine their insurable needs to ensure that the products they have still make sense for them and adjust however necessary to suit their current cash flow capabilities. And so now this becomes a practice of crunching the numbers and weighing the pros and cons of either reducing total coverage or even a temporary premium deferral if the cash flow strain is there. So now in instances where changes to overall coverage is appropriate, this is an opportunity to assess the replacement of coverage altogether. And assuming that that makes sense and provides value to the client, and with increased no medical limits, the selling process has certainly become much more simplified and easy to implement. It starts off with returning to the basics, crunching the numbers and establishing what that insurable need is. Now, with the cash flow strain, how far can they go to self-insure and address their insurable needs? When setting up an emergency fund is 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses, truly enough to deal with whatever financial consequences might affect their family, their estate, should this pandemic continue, should they continue to have cash flow strains. And so it's important to go from that conversation of cash flow planning and then let that segue into a very clear pointed direction towards insurance. And so now we are speaking to this cash flow strain as an insurance selling point, the basis of the insurable need, because it illustrates exactly how important it is to protect themselves and their family from being left to flounder financially. It became an opportunity to now pose the very important question to clients. If it's this difficult for you and your family to manage the financial strain of just a few months lockdown, imagine just how much more difficult it becomes if you become very sick or you pass away. And I think previously the concept of death or becoming critically ill felt a little bit far away or, not relevant to them. It won't happen to me. But the pandemic, I think, has made it very apparent just how real critical illness and death can become and the need to address that and the consequences that it will bring.
You mentioned government benefits. This emergency support from the Canadian government has certainly been a lifeline for the country's economy and many struggling Canadians. How can we incorporate this aspect of contingency planning with our clients?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It is, of course, a huge relief that we could be so fortunate as Canadians to have such a generous array of support programs rolled out to us. However, there was certainly a lot of confusion amongst Canadians about what types of benefits were available and understanding the eligibility criteria behind them. And so I came across many clients who were mistakenly claiming benefits that they shouldn't have, or clients who had not made any claims simply because they did not know that they were eligible or that the benefit existed. And so it was very important to help clients understand the consequences of false claims and assisting them with a plan to repay ineligible benefits. as well as discussing the overall taxable consequences for benefits that were rightfully claimed. I don't think many were considering taxes when all they needed was just emergency funding as quickly as possible. But this certainly is a very important planning aspect to continue to involve with clients.
There are quite a few emergency benefits rolled out. Can you tell us more about some of the specific benefits offered and how you applied those planning concepts with individual clients?
Absolutely. At the start of the initial lockdown, the government responded very quickly with the CERB. And this allowed the government to push out as much support as possible, as quickly as possible. And the CERB was primarily directed towards self-employed individuals who were not eligible for EI. But of course, this ended in fall 2020 and was then replaced with the CRB. And now the CRB, which of course is also directed towards those in the gig economy and those who are self-employed, provides $1,000 per 2-week benefit period. But this is taxed at source, unlike the previous CERB. The main confusion was understanding the 50% income reduction rule in order to be eligible for this benefit. Because this is based on net income after business expenses. And that's what confused many self-employed individuals who very much needed the support of the government benefit, but weren't actually eligible because their income wasn't low enough. Additionally, on top of the 50% income reduction criteria, there's this additional income threshold of $38,000, in which case a 50% clawback of the benefit applies. And so now it's important for clients to understand that even if they are having a financially challenging month and are technically eligible for the benefit, they should anticipate having to pay back a portion if their annual income is approaching or past the $38,000 threshold. So this requires some additional foresight and tax planning that can be implemented with your clients.
Cindy, what about the people who have been forced to stay home because of the pandemic and are not in a situation to continue working? What options are available to them?
Yeah, good question. Because many parents had to stay home and take care of their children who could not physically be present in school during the lockdowns. And so in addition to dealing with the challenge of addressing an income drop, these parents now have to deal with the fact that the children's schools are closed. And for employed parents, they may no longer have the benefit of qualifying for EI or taking paid leave to supervise the children at home. And likewise with self-employed parents, it requires taking time away from one's own business to be with their kids. And so the Canada Recovery Caregiver Benefit was introduced to address this need. And this provides a benefit of $500 a week, again, taxed at source, for those individuals who suffer interruptions to their employment due to having to be at home with the kids. Additionally, I want to also note that it's important to appreciate how far our federal government has gone to ensure that we as Canadians are taken care of while respecting the rules of lockdown. And as we are unfortunately aware, there were and are still many who choose to travel abroad and take vacations. And so, of course, when they return home, they're mandated to self-isolate for 2 weeks, creating a cash flow strain. And while technically they would have been eligible for support benefits, the government had to respond to this and change the rules such that if anyone had traveled internationally, and thus that was the basis of requiring the support benefit, that was the basis of the cash flow interruption, unfortunately, they are no longer eligible. But I think that this is only fair to respect the end goal of being safe and respecting social distancing measures.
And what about clients who are business owners? What benefits apply to them?
There was certainly quite a bit of emergency benefits directed towards business owners. However, I'm going to focus on the two most prevalent today. The first being the Canadian Emergency Business Account, CEBA. And this is one of the only emergency programs which were served as an actual repayable loan, as opposed to a direct income benefit. And so applicants were directed to go through their financial institutions as opposed to the CRA. This became an opportunity for business owners to now receive a $60,000 loan, of which $20,000 could be forgivable if they paid back that $40,000 by December 31st, 2022. So this is a huge cash flow planning opportunity with your clients to help them devise a repayment plan well ahead of time to avoid having to pay back up to $20,000 plus the additional interest that would be applied after 2022. And so we can't overlook the importance of having set up automatic saving systems to essentially create a payback fund, which can double as an emergency fund for them in the meantime. Additionally, there was the Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, and this was directed towards incorporated business owners and was designed to help them stay afloat when suffering drops in revenue of at least 30% by offering a 75% eligible remuneration up to $847 a week. Now, it is important to note that the eligibility requirements and those income drops do differ between the periods available to be applied for. And so this again becomes another opportunity to help guide your client in understanding the various eligibility nuances.
You mentioned having to adapt your business during the pandemic for practical reasons. What about the emotional side of all of this? Can you speak to your clients' mindsets, moods? Have they shifted?
Yes, they certainly did. I found there was definitely a strong sense of fear, of scarcity, feeling like they did not have enough to make ends meet, feelings of financial illiteracy. And so many individuals in my network now became very keenly aware of their own lack of knowledge and very eager to learn. And in the past, I found that it was a sense of hopelessness that held them back from taking those first steps in learning and advancing their financial literacy. But often, these feelings of scarcity are a self-limited belief imposed on oneself simply because they're not actually paying attention to their numbers. So again, this gets addressed in returning to the fundamentals of cash flow planning, of crunching the numbers, of looking at the basics and deducing what is needed to make the household run. And from the numbers deciding, is there actually a case of scarcity here, or is it a mindset block? And very often it was the fear and a mindset issue that made individuals feel like they just couldn't make ends meet, when in fact it just involves a little bit of planning. And so the importance of budgeting and cash flow planning as a tool that can reinforce and improve attitudes about money, using this urgent need to do something right away about the current situation to inspire further learning and instill greater confidence. In some cases, I found that there wasn't as much panic or scarcity or feelings of lack. There was this sense of ease because the government will take care of us. And in this case, I often saw that as a red flag, indicating that the client probably haphazardly applied for multiple benefits for which they perhaps weren't eligible for. And again, this becomes a very important part of the planning process and having these discussions and going through eligibility requirements and making sure the client isn't creating a mess for themselves that they can't get out of.
What we've been seeing is more of a K-shaped recovery to the economy. Some of the population is obviously suffering financially during this period, but others are actually benefiting to the point that they're seeing an increase in their cash flow. Have you experienced this with your clients? And if so, how are you advising them?
Yes, I certainly have experienced that. So for individuals where the cash flow strain was not present because their employment continued and persisted, we had cases where there was much more money than we originally thought, than they thought that they could hold on to. And this became apparent during the lockdowns when all non-essential services were essentially blocked off from us. And now many individuals realize just how non-essential their spending was previously. And, most of the money pits had to do with going out and dining at restaurants, which of course is an enjoyable and wonderful part of life, but it became very, very clear just how much money could be saved when you're not splurging in categories such as shopping and dining out all the time. And so this was now an opportunity to really get a leg up and set oneself up for success and create emergency funds where there wasn't one prior. because now not only does the need for one feel very apparent, but in this case, where their income continues, they now have that extra wiggle room in their budget to provide for a fully funded emergency fund, simply because they couldn't go out and spend their discretionary budget as freely as they hoped. So it certainly was a nice little bittersweet silver lining to the pandemic for some.
Money management certainly isn't the only hurdle for clients. Many businesses have had to adapt to a work-from-home model out of necessity. For individuals used to an office setting, working from home can present its own unique challenges. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, this is something that I face personally as well. Productivity and motivation are huge issues when you're working from home. You know, you have a sense of less accountability when you're not surrounded by your peers or supervisors and management to instill a sense of urgency to get things done. But aside from that, it can stem from simply just not feeling like you have your own space to work. Because not everyone in their homes have a designated office where they can go and be isolated from the chaos and truly focus. Many are just left working at their kitchen table, still surrounded by clutter, still surrounded by noise pollution, and other individuals in the household trying to live their life are also working from home. Interesting, I also noticed that because we are forced now to work from home, this becomes a huge priority, your space at home. And so there was a sudden surge in those who were interested in now upsizing or purchasing a home as opposed to renting, because they now felt too confined in their space, not able to feel comfortable enough to focus and get things done efficiently in their home, especially when you're left sharing the space with many other individuals.
What advice would you give to address these productivity challenges?
Well, it starts with your physical space. It helps a lot to keep your work area tidy and clean, because I find that the visual clutter often does create an additional distraction, create a feeling of being overwhelmed or encroached upon. So having your space very clear, tidy, free of clutter and distractions. That includes distractions such as having a TV off in the corner, or your couch where you might look and want to go and relax. It helps a lot to put yourself physically in a space that is free of those distractions entirely. Additionally, we can address these challenges by catering our time more specifically. What I mean by that is that if specific workday hours don't actually apply to your industry, we want to make sure that we're not beating ourselves up for not getting enough done during the day. Personally, I do have trouble working during the day. I find myself wanting to complete chores, wanting to do other tasks, and in my case, that's perfectly fine because I'm not chained to my desk from 9 to 5. And then I allow myself the opportunity to focus and enter that flow state in the evening. And initially, this did become a bit of a challenge to convince myself that that's okay, because I think in the back of our minds, we still believe that we should be working from 9 to 5. That's when everyone expects us to work. That's when people expect replies to their emails. However, when you're already dealing with so much stress, so much anxiety from being in your home, especially when you have children who are trying to learn from home as well, and you're left supervising them, working during those standard hours might not be a possibility. And so now it becomes an opportunity to give yourself a break by focusing on your evenings or whatever time works best for you to really dive into your work and get things done. And don't beat yourself up just because it didn't happen during the standard hours. I think a lot of individuals have a sense of understanding and empathy for the current circumstances and are not going to hold it against you if you're not able to respond to them directly at noon, for example. Especially for individuals with young children at home during the day, the evenings after bedtime might actually be your only opportunity for quiet focus. So we should embrace that.
Productivity has been a challenge for some of us advisors who aren't used to working from home on our own. Do you have any suggestions for us?
One way we can address productivity issues is taking advantage of the tech tools that are available to us. Our industry was forced to adapt very quickly and become tech friendly due to social distancing requirements. So take advantage of these tools, embrace technology to help make your life easier. And going back to organizing our time for advisors, for me especially, I found myself specifically time blocking my week, picking certain days in which I take meetings with clients, certain days in which I sit down and focus on client work and administrative processes, and allowing myself to contain my effort in that way. So not only is it a matter of choosing the times during the day that work best for you, for example, the evenings versus during the day, but also picking the days of the week that make sense for you as well. And embracing that again and letting go of the old and antiquated at this point idea that we must work Monday to Friday from 9 to 5. Things have been turned on their head, and so we certainly need to adapt and come up with a schedule and a routine that encourages us to remain in a flow state and stay focused without feeling stressed.
I've recently incorporated time blocking into my practice as well, and I too have found it helpful with my productivity. Thank you for the great overview of the government relief benefits and helping us understand these rules so we can help our clients wade through the confusion. Thank you very much, Cindy.
Thank you very much, Chris. It was my absolute pleasure to be here with you today.